Hello Airfix fans, I'm Nathan. We're here at the Lincolnshire Aviation Heritage Centre and we're looking at their restoration project, the Lancaster. Yesterday we were lucky enough to see a taxi run, and today we're here with flight specialist Michael Clegg, who's going to talk to us about all things Lancaster and all things Dambusters. Let's get into it.
If the men of RAF number 617 Squadron were going to be successful in the dam-busting raid on the evening of the 16th and 17th of May 1943, they were going to be needing something like this. For the Dambusters Raid, they were going to need a very specialist aircraft that was going to have to be modified for the task, because the upkeep mine was a unique and recently invented weapon. The only aircraft that was capable of doing that was the Lancaster. It was the huge Bombay, and the fact that it was our premier bomber at the time meant that it was the only one really that could be adapted for the job. So they took 23, I think, in total, Lancasters from the Lancaster production line, and they modified them to 464 provisioning standard, which meant the removal of the huge Bombays and the installation of the mechanism that was going to carry the mine. Obviously they had to make it aerodynamic as well, so they're a little bit of fairing, but that was so they were basically standard Lancasters. Now the one that you can see behind us is a later variant of the Lancaster, so it's got modified turret, modified weapons on the rear and the front turret, and the turret position is actually different to the ones that would be on the B3 Special, which is what was used for the Dambusters Raid. But as I say, there were actually only 23 of those in existence, and only 19 of them flew on the raid. A couple were used for sort of prototyping purposes, and one was damaged during the training, with another unserviceable just before the raid. So the main reason that made the Lancaster such a successful aeroplane is this huge unobstructed Bombay. As you can see, there's no ridges, no separation in there, so it meant that this aircraft could carry an array of weaponry and different sized bombs, which gave it, unbelievable flexibility. And it, combined with its range, speed, operating altitude, it made it the ideal choice for the Chastise Raid as well. So the Lancasters that were used on the Dambusters Raid were basically Lancaster B1s, but with different engines. So rather than having the British-made Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, they used the American Packards. So that denoted that they were B3s. But you'll see that they're denoted as being specials. You could argue that they should have been called 464 provisioning Lancasters, because that was the technology behind the work to create the bouncing bomb release mechanism. So that was installed here, but in order to do that, they had to remove these Bombay, and they need to adapt the Bombay to carry this huge, technically advanced mine, which was like a huge cylindrical, like a big oil drum realistically, but it had to spin in reverse at about 500 revs per minute, and it had to be released at the right height and at the right speed in order to have the right impact. So with the reverse of the spinning mine, it would skip along the water, and the important thing about that is that the Germans knew that the dams were a target, so they had anti-submarine nets right at the front to stop anything that way. So this weapon actually bounced over those, which was they'd never thought about that. So all the work to put the provisioning technology was done there, designed by Barnes Wallis and the Vickers team, and installed in associated with the Avro team, who they must have worked really closely with, and 23 of these aircraft were modified for that purpose, and as we all now know, 19 of them actually took part in the Dambusters Raid.
The first 19 Lancasters took off from RAF Scampton at 9:28 on the 16th of May, with the squadron suffering its first casualties soon after. While flying over the Dutch coast, one plane was shot down, while another struck an electricity pylon and crashed.
the technology behind this raid is absolutely fantastic. I mean, the British, they thought about targeting the great German dams as early as 1937. But of course, I mean, we weren't at war then, and then when the war started, we were very much on the defensive to start with. The dams were providing the power for the German war industry, and if that could be disrupted, then hopefully that would, you know, it would prevent the Germans from advancing in the war, and that was the thinking. But you know, the work to do that didn't actually start taking place until 1942, because of course the Germans knew the vulnerability of those, so they protected them. So if it wasn't, you know, submarine nets to stop any traditional type of weaponry being used towards the dam walls, the sides of the dams were either protected by, you know, geographical, you know, nature, whatever, you know, steep sides and machine gun nests. So anything coming in would have been potentially shot down. But also any weaponry, conventional weaponry, would have hit the net. So, but they didn't think about Barnes Wallis and his idea of skimming marbles over the water in his back garden. That's where he got his initial idea, which he thought would be useful against huge battleships. But it was adapted later on, and they were found that it was going to be used against these dams, which, you know, was a statement raid realistically. But to mount this thing, which is, I mean, it looks heavy, and I'm sure it was heavy, on a Lancaster, and to get it to deliver, rotating at about 500 revs per minute in reverse, so that when the reverse motion hit the water, it would skip. And whilst it was still, you know, obviously every skip it would lose some kinetic energy, but by the time it got to the wall, it would roll down because it was doing it, and then at a predetermined depth it would explode. But the actual mechanics of getting this on a Lancaster is the interesting thing, because Barnes Wallis and Vickers developed this, what they called it the 464 provisioning mechanism, which was basically some heavy-duty calipers that were fixed underneath the front of the Lancaster, and they would support this and then drive it to get the rotation. But if you will, when it was time to release it, if it didn't release perfectly, then it would oscillate and probably destroy straight away. So to get it to drop in a parallel attitude meant that the calipers, which were really strong, would have to open at exactly the right time to allow this thing to drop, which, I mean, and they only had a short space of time to actually achieve this. I think the Dambusters themselves had about a month of flight practicing, and not all that was done with the modified Lancasters. The majority of it was done with existing Lancasters they borrowed from other units, so they could get the flying. And so not only did these poor devils have to get the flying and the navigation and you know, and attacking the actual targets to a T, they also had to deliver the weapon, which would have been difficult, and it had never been practiced before. So the first time this weapon was used in anger was on the night of the Dambusters Raid, and as we all know, it turned out to be a success. So this is a rather effective diagram that shows Guy Gibson's bomber on the raid, and this is at the Lincolnshire Aviation Heritage Museum, part of their display, and it shows how the upkeep mine was delivered and how it bounced over the water at the predetermined height, obviously to make sure that it arrived where it should do, and over the torpedo nets, which would have stopped it, and then the reverse rotation took it down to the predetermined depth, and then it would explode. Gibson made the first run. Obviously he delivered it correctly, but it didn't cause a breach, so obviously it would have damaged the structure. But then what he did, rather than leaving it to his squadron mates, he went along and flew alongside each Lancaster that was making its attack run to draw the anti-aircraft fire, which is, you know, incredible bravery. But again, as we said before, this type of technology they thought it was a good idea, but it had never been used in anger. So the first time it was used in anger was on this particular raid, which again, it just gives you immense admiration for these men. The actual result of the raid, even though the Myrna was breached and the Ida was damaged, I think, it was more of a psychological victory, I suppose, rather than a tactical one, because although the water did escape and there was unfortunately quite a bit of loss of life, the the Germans threw a lot of resource at it, and it was, the disruption only lasted for a short time. But I mean, it was a great success for the British. I mean, the RAF could go to the British people and say, you know, look what we can achieve, and it was an amazing result. And from the Germans, the propagandists didn't have an opportunity to water down the impact of the Allies' effectiveness. This basically said to the Germans, the Allies can do whatever they want with these new super weapons, and basically we're going to lose the war. So the real impact of the Dambusters Raid wasn't the fact that it was it caused a breach and put war production out for weeks, perhaps a month or so, something like that. It was the psychological impact it had on the German people.
Well, it's been a real pleasure to be here at the Lincolnshire Aviation Heritage Centre and to get up close and personal to the Lancaster. Hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And if you're ever in the East Kirkby area, why not come and visit? And as always, please like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.